Excel Language School. A real passion for learning.
Welcome back. Hi, I'm David from Excel Language School, and we're here again to talk about IELTS writing. Now, today we're going to talk about a Task 2 essay, and you may remember from previous time that there are two essays you have to write, Task 1 and Task 2, and of those two, Task 2 is the more important one. It counts for 2/3 of your grade, and it's recommended that you should use 40 minutes of your hour to write this, including planning beforehand and, most importantly, rereading your essay and trying to find mistakes afterwards. Now, if you watched an earlier video, you may remember that food trucks have been sort of a theme in my class, and so we wrote a Task 1 essay on food trucks, and now I had my class write a Task 2 essay on the same theme. Now, in my Wednesday evening writing class here at Excel Language School, first I had the students read an article from the British news magazine The Economist about food trucks, and particularly the problems that food trucks were having in the United States. Because in certain cities in the United States, food trucks are threatening the business of the more traditional restaurants. And the traditional restaurants are seeking help from the city government to stop this competition from food trucks. Okay, so after this preparation, I gave the students the following question. City governments should protect traditional restaurants from competition from food trucks. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Write 250 words. Now, I also tell the student it's very important that they should write at least 240, and maybe a little more is okay, but not over 270 words. If they write a really long essay, they will actually get a lower score than they would if they wrote an essay that is closer to 250 words. Okay, and I gave the student a 6-6.5 on the test. You may see that. And the reasons were that the paper had many of the qualities of a band 6.5, but not all of them. So that's why I gave them this mark. And so on the top of the paper, you will see I wrote, keep experimenting with vocabulary. And that's sort of going to be a theme of the video today. Now, the IELTS is a difficult test, and in my opinion, you should have at least 6 months of extra classes before you try the test yourself. Now, maybe 2 times a week at first, and then when you get closer to the test, you may want to go more often, maybe 4 times a week or even more. So when you are close to the test time, you want to concentrate on doing the task under genuine test conditions as much as possible. Meaning that, for example, if you have 40 minutes to write an essay, you should time yourself so that you know in your heart how long 40 minutes is. However, if you are more than, say, 2 months away from your test date, you may allow yourself to do the activities in less than strict test conditions. And so today, the student has a few months before they take the IELTS test, and so I'm encouraging her to experiment with vocabulary. And so when I say that, I mean in the reading section or the listening section, you may hear a word or read a word that you think is interesting and you want to use, and then come to the writing class and try to use it in your essay. And sometimes it will work out perfectly, and then sometimes the teacher might say, this word doesn't really work here, and then you'll have to go back and study it again and maybe try it again in a later essay. Now, of course, all of my students want their essays to be perfect the first time, but if you learn new vocabulary and you try to use it in your essay, that's a great way to experiment. And so I always tell my students to try to do this. And if it's wrong, don't worry about it. They have time to try it again and try to get a better idea of how the word works, how the connotation works, how the grammar works. Now, let's get to the essay itself. Now, in the first line, the student wrote, "Citizens have more opportunities to enjoy their lives by going to restaurants." And that is perfectly okay. It is 100% correct English. But I think the student is ready to try to say the same thing with higher level vocabulary. So I made a suggestion, you will see, and the suggestion is citizens have a greater diversity of restaurant choice. And that says the same thing that the student says, but it uses higher level vocabulary. Okay, and now on the fourth line, you may see that the student wrote, "Many restaurants are developing to satisfy customer respectation." Now the problem with this is this word, respectation, is actually not an English word. You won't find it in the dictionary. Probably the student decided that she wanted to try a new word and she mixed the word respect maybe with the word expectation, and she created a new word, which is very creative, but it's probably not appropriate for the IELTS. So I told her that, and I told her that she probably was trying to think of the word expectation, which is the best word to use in this case, I think. Again, I'm encouraging the student to think about higher level vocabulary. On the second line, writing about restaurants, right, the student writes, "They are stable and insured about the sanitation." And in this case, again, the student's meaning is perfectly clear, but I think the word insure might be improved, and if they use higher level language. So I suggested that the restaurants, they are stable and have adequate sanitation. And then on the last sentence of the paragraph, the student writes, "The price of food you eat at the restaurant is stabilized." And instead of the passive voice at the end of the sentence, I suggested that the students use the adjective. So instead of writing, "The price of food you eat at the restaurant is stabilized," I wrote, "The price of food you eat at a restaurant is stable." Okay, and so the first sentence of the next paragraph says, "A restaurant has the advantage of a fixed price, therefore citizens do not have to find it on the map." And you see this example is a problem that I see frequently, which is that students connect two sentences with the word therefore. They put a comma before therefore and a comma after therefore. And so this is not a good strategy. It is a mistake. And so I think I've talked to you before about how instead of trusting my own judgment, sometimes I look on the internet to see if other people have agreed with me. And this was one of those times where I looked on the internet for confirmation of my opinion. Now, I searched the internet for information on this topic, and I found this webpage that you see, and it is from the Writing Center of Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And you will see that in the website, they clearly say that you cannot use therefore to connect two sentences. And it gives examples of sentences that are incorrect with therefore connecting two sentences. And then on the bottom, it has corrections of the same sentence. And you may also notice that the words however and moreover also cannot be used to connect two sentences. So, getting back to the student paper, about this error, the student needs to divide her sentence into two halves. So it reads like this: a restaurant has the advantage of a fixed price, full stop. Therefore, with capital T, comma, citizens do not have to find it on a map. So let's go to page 2 of the student essay and look at the top of page 2. And on the second line, The student starts a new paragraph, and she writes, however, not everyone agree. And so this is another example of an error that I see often in student essays. And the error is that students have to remember that all words like everyone, everybody, anyone, anybody, no one, nobody, all of these words are singular. So if you are going to use them in present simple tense, you need to put the S at the end of the verb that it goes with. Now, of course, this is not a terrible mistake. It doesn't obstruct the student's meaning at all, but still you want to get as much right as possible, especially because only a few lines later the student makes a very basic error that probably about something that she learned in her first year of English learning way back in elementary school. And she writes, food trucks is. And of course, we all know you have to have plural verb. It should be food trucks are. Food trucks are. Now, this is the sort of error I tell students when they are finished with their IELTS essay, they should allow some time to go back and read the essay again so they can find very simple errors that they will make and correct them before the essay gets to the reader. Now, moving to the fourth line of the same paragraph, the student writes, they provide food which is tasty, fresh, and newfangled. Now, I like this. This is the student trying to use higher level vocabulary, experimenting with higher level vocabulary, especially the student uses the word newfangled. I admire the student for trying this word, but it doesn't quite work in this context, and I would like to explain to you why. Okay, so words, all words, not just English words, but Vietnamese words too, they have connotation. And some have good connotation, and some have bad connotation. Now, what does that mean, connotation? It means the extra hidden meaning that a word carries when you use it. And I'll give you an example that I think every Vietnamese student knows. If you meet an English speaker and maybe they've had a death in their family, maybe their cousin, you would say to them, I'm sorry your cousin has passed away. You would not say, I'm sorry your cousin has died, because this word died, it's very harsh. And so we have this softer word, passed away. It has a more pleasant, a better connotation. So a lot of words have special connotation, and one thing you learn by writing a lot is you learn what is the connotation of a word. So returning to our essay, I just want to remind you the sentence we are talking about. The student writes, they provide food which is tasty, fresh, and newfangled. And newfangled is a word with negative connotation, right? And so it means that you use it when something is new and maybe you don't like it so much. Maybe it's not such a good thing. So it doesn't quite work here in this context, but it's a great word, and I hope that the student holds on to this word and will find a place to use it where it's more appropriate. Okay, so moving on to the end of the next paragraph, I recommend that the student change a word. That is, the student use the word novel, right? And so this word, maybe if you are an English student, you know this word novel. A novel can be a long story, a book, like for example, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is a novel. But novel as an adjective also has another meaning, which means new and interesting. And not long after that, I also make another correction, and the student writes, food trucks have become a label of self-motivation. Now, I think the student's meaning in this case is 100% clear, but the word label is not exactly the correct word here. So I suggest the student use some higher level vocabulary. For example, food trucks have become a symbol of self-motivation, or food trucks have become an example of self-motivation. Okay, now the rest of the essay is very clear, easy to read, quite good. And so when the student makes a problem with word choice, it does not interfere with what she wants to say. So that's why I gave this student essay 6 or perhaps 6.5. I'm very optimistic that this student will continue to improve if she continues her courses here at the Excel Language Center. And she already knows a lot of interesting vocabulary and is trying to introduce it to her writing, which is a great way to raise your band score. So I hope that she will continue and that she will get a great score when the big day comes and she takes the IELTS.
Excel Language School. A real passion for learning.